All right, so the big question that everybody has is, should my business focus on business development or sales, or possibly both? And it's a really interesting question, especially when you're starting out as a startup, because it's going to determine how you are going to grow. So to dive into it, what I want to do is I want to explain the strengths and weaknesses of both sides so you have a very clear understanding of what you're getting into when you decide on which path to take. So the first one we're going to go into is sales. What is the sales strengths and weaknesses that you should consider when you're deciding to grow your startup? So when it comes to strengths, obviously the sales cycle is going to be faster. And the reason is because you don't have to customize your product. You're selling the same thing over and over to everyone. And as you get feedback, you can improve the product, but essentially you're selling the same thing. And because you're selling it so fast relative to business development, you're generating revenue much more quickly. Whereas a business partnership or business relationship like in BD, business development, you have to rely on other channels to generate sales for you, and then you're going to get your cut. But if you're doing it yourself and you know what you're doing and you're doing it fast, then you can generate sales for now. And you don't have to rely on any third parties, which is a really big benefit for some people. If you don't have product market fit quite yet, it's a lot more practical because the sales cycle is a lot faster. So when you approach a company and you have a meeting with them, they're going to tell you yes or no, and you're going to know whether or not you have a product that's actually scalable for your startup. Sales relative to business development is much more straightforward and simple, and it doesn't require you to do a lot of custom work or strategic thinking in that sense. Although I wouldn't say it's easy, but it's relatively more straightforward. And when you do master sales, you got product market fit, you got your sales cycle down, you can really scale your business in a very predictable way once you start hiring salespeople and start training them the same way. And so once if you are a master in sales and you become one, you can really scale your businesses. And a lot of companies, for example, Oracle, scaled their business by really developing their direct sales team. Now, let's go ahead and talk about the weaknesses when it comes to sales. So the big drawback, obviously, is that if you want to scale, you're going to have to hire more salespeople to generate more revenue. And a lot of times, you may not have the funds to do that. When you're hiring more people, not only that, but you're going to have to prospect into more businesses to see if there's a fit on both sides. You're going to have to send a lot of emails to get a lot of different meetings and really see if you can sell something there. And a lot of people, they may not want to build their own internal sales team and use their own resources to do that. And when you're building out a sales team, especially when it's internal, you're basically paying for these people to go out and sell your product. And if they don't sell enough product to cover the cost of themselves, then you might be taking a loss if you haven't figured things out, and each salesperson may be losing you money every year if you do it incorrectly. Something that may be a weakness for some people is that because the product doesn't change that much, if the product is not good to begin with, it's very difficult to sell it. You're gonna have to make improvements. So by having a fixed product, it is good that it's simple, but if it's not the best product out there, then it's gonna be very difficult to sell. Hiring a sales team and building it internally and getting them to prospect, it technically is more work because it requires a lot more manpower compared to business development. There are strengths, the main ones really is that it's faster sales cycle, generate that sale more quickly. It's more straightforward. You can repeat the cycle and really scale up if you know what you're doing. The con is really the amount of resources you have to scale, and that's really hiring salespeople. So let's go ahead and dive into business development. What are the strengths and weaknesses in that? Some strengths is for business development, you can actually scale your business without hiring a large sales team, and that's because you can get one person to go out and build these relationships with other companies, and those other companies may be able to sell your product for you. And so with that, it technically is less work because it requires less manpower, but I wouldn't say it's more easier, it's just less manpower. And so with business development, you can reach new audiences by tapping into other people's audiences, and you don't have to directly go into it. Other people will be selling for you. And also, when you do business development deals, it's really easy for you to leverage the brand of other business you're working with. For example, the Genius and Spotify example, Genius can now go out to all these other companies and say, hey, Spotify is working with us. And, essentially you can do that with sales as well. And business development is a lot more strategic versus repetitive sales cycle. So in sales, you're basically going out and selling the same thing and doing the same dance over and over. For business development, it's a lot more strategic thinking, and it requires you to be a lot more mindful in how you approach business opportunities versus for sales, you can keep repeating the process and make mistakes and then improve on those mistakes. So, it really depends on what your style is. If you're someone that likes to repeat things over and over and get better at it over time, then sales might be a better fit. But if you're someone that's more strategic and you rather make a couple big chess moves to get some big deals, business development may be the channel for you. Now let's go ahead and talk about the weaknesses. So business development, the sales cycles is typically much longer than when it comes to sales. That's because when you're selling something, you're basically just selling it, you're in and you're out. But for business development, you're developing a partnership. And when you develop these partnerships, they typically last for years, and it's going to take a long time for someone to decide whether or not they should work with you. You're going to need a lot of internal resources to afford the long-term potential revenue in the future. And what I mean by this is that because the sales cycle is so long for business development, you may not be generating revenue right off the bat. Whereas sales, it's something you can do because you get in, you get the money, you get out. For business development, you might be talking to somebody for months or years before they actually do a deal with you. And so if you don't have the funds to fund your company until you get to that point when you start generating revenue, business development may not be the best fit. A lot of founders may not like this, but for business development, you are reliant on the success of your partners, meaning, if you work really hard to get a deal with a really big company, and if they don't do the job or they don't do what they promised they would do, then you put all that time into that deal and then nothing comes out of it. And that may be very devastating for a lot of people. And so with sales, you can actually just do everything yourself and get the sales. Whereas business development, although you can tap into new audiences in a much scalable way, if they don't do the job, then you're not making revenue anyway. And now one of the other drawbacks is that it's going to take a lot of time to scale. Now, business development is technically more scalable when it comes to growing your company, but it's going to take a lot longer because you're going to have to focus on a lot of key deals that may take months or years before, anything fruitful happens. And the last part is it's only practical if you have product market fit. So in sales, you can go out, try to sell something. If they say no, you can iterate on your pitch or your product, and then you go back and do it again and again and again. For business development, because the sales cycle was so long, once you start these relationships, you want to make sure that you can actually offer real value and that, it already is a good fit and it makes sense to work with each other from your end. So if you don't have product market fit, business development probably may not be the best for you because other companies who are going to vet whether or not they should work with you can see if it's not, and then you pretty much are just wasting your time at that point. So again, there are going to be strengths and weaknesses when it comes to business development. It really depends on where your startup is, and it may be for you, it may not be for you. So you really just got to weigh these out. And so the main big difference between business development and direct sales is how the money is passed from the customer, the end user, all the way to you. So in direct sales, you have you on the left corner, right? And you're going to go out and find customers who may want to buy your product or service. If they like it, they're going to give you money, and they're going to give it directly to you, and you take all the money because there's nobody in between. Now, when it comes to business development, it's a little bit different. You're going to be on the left side, and then there's going to be this third party in the middle. And so what you're doing, you're going out to all these third parties, and you're trying to sell them on your product or service and say, hey, you should sell this to your customer base. And so they're going to go out and go to their customer base and say, hey, we got this new product by this one person. Do you want to buy it or not? So the customer will say, sure, I want to buy it. So they pass the money over to the third party. And because there's somebody in the middle, they're going to give you a smaller cut, and that's going to go to you. But even though you got a smaller cut of what the customer paid for, it's okay because the third party went out and did the selling for you. So essentially they earned their piece. And so the main key differences between direct sales and business development is when you're doing direct sales, you have control. You have power of who you go after, how you go after them, and you have complete 100% control of whether or not you're making the revenue. Business development is a little bit different where you're relying on third parties to do a good job. If they do a great job, you may make a lot more money, but if they don't do a great job at all and they're just not really pulling through for you, then you're not going to make anything, and there's really not much you can do about it except try to find new partners, and it might take you a long time. And so that's the main differences I see when it comes to direct sales or business development. So if you got a product that you believe you can sell yourself and you can sell it quickly, and you're somebody that want to hire a sales team, direct sales might be a better fit. But if you're somebody that don't necessarily want to manage a huge sales team and you want to be a little more strategic and just work with the key people who are going to sell your product or service to their customer base, then business development might be for you. So just look at your startup and see what's the best way to grow whatever it is that you have. And not only that, but you also have to think about what's the best thing for you personally from a management standpoint or a personal standpoint. Do you like to go out and directly sell to people, or do you like other people to do the selling for you? And so just think about those two things, and with that, you'll be able to weigh your decision on which one you should do. There are similarities between business development and sales, and that is the sales cycle between business development and direct sales is very similar, especially when it comes to this course. What you're essentially going to do, no matter whether you choose business development or sales, is that you're going to cold email somebody you think will be a great fit for your product or service. Then you're going to get a meeting with them, and then, over a series of meetings, a lot of things are going to happen, like negotiation, presentations, things like that. And then at the end, you're going to close the deal. So whether you're doing business development or sales, the sales process is the same: cold email, meeting, close the deal. And then if you're in sales, if you close the deal, you get the money right away. If you're in business development, you lock in a deal where that person's going to sell for you, and you should expect to get money over time. And so your company actually can execute business development strategies and sales strategies like I mentioned before, similar to how Oracle does it. And I'll give you an example of how the other company I used to work at, Lob, did it. And so for Lob, there's two divisions. There's direct sales, where if you go on Lob's website, you can buy our products, right off the bat, right? And so what we do is we essentially provide a way for companies to send postcards electronically. So rather than having to write it out or print it out, you could send it as easily as you would an email. So if a person goes on, or they choose the custom enterprise tab, someone like me would get on the phone with them, and they might say, hey, I want to buy 50,000 postcards per month. How much is that going to cost? I'm going to quote them, and then they're just going to buy it, and then they're going to pay me every single month for the postcards that they bought. And so that's how direct sales is going to work. But when it comes to a business relationship partnership, this is one Lob did with Autopilot. And so what Autopilot is, it's a marketing software where people go on and they could set up these automated marketing triggers where if a customer does something on their website, then they might automatically get an email or automatically get a text message or postcard. And so if you notice how they built out that section up for the postcards, so it says here, engaged at just the right time with personal email, in-app message, SMS, and postcards. So when you think about that postcard section, what they're actually doing is they're using Lob's technology and they're integrating it into Autopilot. And so if for a customer who goes on Autopilot, they're just going to use it as is. They have no idea Lob is working in the background to make it happen. And so when they want to send postcards on Autopilot, Autopilot's going to send a message to Lob, and then Lob's going to actually deliver on that postcard. But the end user does not really know this. So what Lob did is it provided value for Autopilot in that it gave them the functionality to add the ability to send postcards from their marketing software, and makes it really easy for their customers to send these postcards. So every time an Autopilot customer sends a postcard using Autopilot, Lob is going to get paid. And so this is an example of a business development deal, because basically to make that happen, it's a lot of conversation between engineers to, actually build this out and get it integrated. But once it's integrated, if people are actually using it, Lob can expect people to use the postcards on Autopilot, and they're just going to keep getting a check every single month for all the postcards that they send. So it's very different from direct sales, because direct sales, I would go in, I would get someone to buy the postcards, and I would get out. For Autopilot, it's built into their software. So for the rest of the time, as long as Autopilot continues to use it, Lob is going to continue to get paid over and over when people use the postcard functionality on the Autopilot website. And so even at the bottom, right, you could see the companies that use Autopilot, like Freshdesk, Crunchbase, Lyft, Microsoft, Patreon. So basically Lob can go out to all these other companies, if, in the case of a business development deal, and say, hey, Microsoft uses us, Lyft uses us. And actually maybe they don't directly use Lob, but because Autopilot uses Lob and they are a customer of Autopilot, they are technically a customer of Lob as well. And so with these business development deals, you can really leverage these brands when you tap into another person's customer base, and then you can go out and it makes it a lot more easier to sell. And so doing both at the same time, Lob does direct sales, and at the same time it does a lot of business development with these other startups. So when you're thinking about growing your startup, you want to think about, do people want to buy my product direct, or does it make sense to be focusing on business development and trying to work out deals like Lob did with Autopilot? And so once you get one business development deal, you can get another and another and another, and that's how you really scale your business, because once you get like multiple huge businesses to continue to use your product every single month, that's when you reach true scale. And when it comes to direct sales, you're gonna have to build a huge sales team and just sell over and over and over. So just look at what type of company you want to build. And the really thing I want to stress is that you want to be mindful in how you do it. Be mindful in what type of company you're trying to build, what's the most reasonable for you personally, and what kind of team you want to manage. And if you want to do direct sales and you're good at selling, do direct sales. But if you want to do business development, do the business development if you want other people to sell for you. And so that's everything we got to cover between the strengths and differences between direct sales and business development. Choose the one that works best for you. And essentially, I mean, if you wanted to, you could try direct sales, see how it goes. And if it doesn't work that well, go to the business development, see how it goes. And if both work really well, do both. If you have the bandwidth and you have the funds and you can hire more people, you can do both and see which one works the best. So that's everything. Be smart, be conscious, pick the one that works for you, focus on it, and then move on from there.